So one of the things we're starting to see from a iron head point of view is the introduction of the high launch irons. Now there's a real prominence to this from a fitting standpoint, which is height, stopping power, control. So we're going to take three of the heads. We're going to take the Mizuno, the hot metal, 925 hot metal, and the HL, the Callaway Elyte and the Elyte HL. And we've got these, you see a little sticker saying retro on the back, the 440 and a retro lofted 440 as well. And really looking at moderate speed, so between 75 and 80 miles an hour, I'll be swinging there. What does it actually mean from a ball flight, height, spin, stopping power point of view? Because irons are there for accuracy. They're not just a yardage in terms of total distance side of things. We all want as much efficiency as possible, but let's not lose the function of playing them into the green. So how do each of these three react relative to one another? What trends can we see? And in the end, we'll do a little bit more of a real lifestyle test as well, just to show that on-course scenario. So we're going to go through the three different heads, or three different models, one by one. So we're going to start with the Ping, the 440. We'll do the 440 standard loft and then the retro. Then we'll go into the Callaways, then we'll go into the Mizunos. So I'm going to go through 4 or 5 shots with each to get a good base average, and then we'll compare the data at the end and give you any comments then. Oh, the other element, we're testing with the Wilson Triad ball. So it's a ball which is really relevant to the kind of moderate speed golfer, great price point, but really good performance ball, and something we'll be doing a review on a little bit later in the year, soon down the line I'm sure, but wanted to use the most relevant components, so not necessarily the Pro V1 style ball, a softer core, softer compression, which is more relevant to the swing speed that we're looking at now. So a few nice shots there, keeping the flight nice and neutral, trying to keep that swing speed just below the 80 mile an hour mark. Got very forgiving head, but quite a strong flight. So let's move up to the retro loft and take a look and see how high that goes. So 440 head, retro loft. Another few shots with this. So noticeably higher launch, but it'll be interesting. We'll carry through into the Callaway, then to Mizuno. We'll round up all the data at the end. Definitely hitting the screen higher, but we'll see what it does to spin too. But let's move into the Callaways next. So if you're enjoying this kind of content and the comparisons, there's our latest fitting video that we've done. It's a shorter format, so we're really interested to see what you think of that format and how it compares to the longer stage as well. So into the Callaway Elyte, the standard model first. So we'll hit a few of these. Move into the HL, just as we did with the Ping, with the 440 and the retro spec. So certainly more solid feel and really noticeably lower launch angle. Let's move into the HL and see what that does. So actually over these first couple, quite interesting. The Callaway's less of a difference in launch angle than the loft change and the retro spec on the 440. But on these two, I'm not seeing huge spin and height, well, launch angle with the Ping, but not seeing big spin differentials. So we've actually left the head that we found the biggest difference with till last, which is the Mizuno, the 925 hot metal, comparing to the HL. That really has kicked flight up. So it'll be interesting to compare. Whilst these are marketed as HL heads, that retro spec in Ping has kicked up launch angle. I'd like to see a bit more spin out of it, because spin helps with keeping it in the air, keeping the carry. So it'll be fascinating to move to the Mizunos and get that comparison and see where each of them sits and how effective they really are at doing the job that they purport to do on the back of the head. So switching into the JPX 925 hot metal range now, the high launch has been the best performer that we've seen in the fitting bay this year, and actually previous model as well. The 923 was really good. So how does this one compare? Does it kick the spin up and kick the launch up that bit more and give players who need the extra flight, does that help get that for you that little bit better than the others? Again, another solid feeling head. Actually pretty good from a launch angle point of view. That faded one's going to add a little bit to the flight on that, but it picks the ball up well, even though this is the stronger loft. So the HL, let's really see where that takes it to. So again, it's a really well balanced feeling head, very stable, but from a feel point of view, does pick it up very, very easily. I think the Ping was the other one that launched it really well, but the spin wasn't quite so good as we're going to see in a moment. But let's drive through the data, have a look at the summaries and see which one is the most effective at getting that ball flight up. So I think it makes sense to look at the averages of those batch of shots. What I have done, because these aren't a reflective core tech, they're not a Titleist with the reflective in the trackline balls, we've got the silver dots on, so there are a couple of shots that have a calculated spin. I've taken those out. So what we can see from the averages here, I'm going to take each model in turn, but starting with the Ping. So ball speed efficiency, great, out of the G440 down the bottom here. And as you can see, club speed between the two, almost identical. Angle of attack, pretty darn similar, half a degree difference. So spin rate wise, now there will be slight variables in strike point on these. Well, this is a human test, not a robot test, but the spin hasn't really changed that much. Some players may see more of a difference than this. I would certainly, in a fitting, hope to see a bit more difference than this. But what it has achieved with the retro loft to the standard in the Ping is a good couple of degrees difference in loft. Actually, one of the things that maybe should have stated earlier on is that with all of these heads, all of the standard model 6-iron lofts are at 25 degrees, and the retros are 27.5 or 28, and the high launch heads. So actually, the loft differential on each of these heads is the same, and the base lofts on each of the heads, if you're at the higher launch head, the standard loft head, are the same as well. So we've tried to keep as much consistency across as possible. Same shaft, same spec, same setup. So the Ping heads really picked the angle, the launch angle up noticeably. So spin hasn't had a huge effect, but that launch angle pickup is really noticeable. A little bit of a distance drop off, strike point drop off. Now that's potentially there's a bit of me in that as well. I'm not going to strike everything as cleanly, and certainly got some absolute rippers out of the standard loft one. But 2.5 degrees on launch angle, pretty significant. But because the spin hasn't changed too much, in terms of actual height difference, we're only looking at 6 feet. Land angle's up 2.2 degrees. So we're seeing it move in the right direction. Definitely a help with launch angle, but not a massive kick up in descent angle and therefore control because the spin stayed low. Moving up to the Callaway, I'll just scroll so they sit at the bottom of the screen here. The two Callaway models, the Elyte and the Elyte HL. Again, club speed, 1 mile an hour difference. Ball speed, again, the lower loft out of the standard model getting a bit more ball speed, a bit more efficiency. Now, there's not a huge amount of differential in terms of launch angle here. I'd have hoped for more, but again, this is something that we have seen with the HL head. It picks the launch angle up a bit, but again, spin really hasn't changed too much. Angle of attack was actually a little bit steeper with the lower loft model, and retained launch angle pretty well, but we've only picked up 4 feet of height there, that's 63 feet versus 59. So whilst it is a slightly higher loft, it's not doing a great deal for me in this instance to generate that extra spin. A bit more height, but actually if we're looking to gain control into the greens, the spin rate starts to become, as we can see here, quite critical. So that little aside to camera after hitting the Callaways and the Pings to say, not sure we're seeing much spin difference, really holds out in this. We then move on to the Mizuno. Now, I'd hoped it would make a big difference because it's what we've seen in the fitting bays. And again, what we can see here, same club speed, actually same efficiency. Both heads pick the ball up really well in terms of contact. But we're now seeing 2.5 degrees of launch angle gain, but we're seeing the spin gain. And that is the big differentiator with the Mizuno head this year. This is why, not just us, I've seen reviews by other channels out there who give this as their top head for this year in terms of the game improvement side of things, and we would certainly agree. It's that launch and spin gain that really marks the Mizuno head out. So not only are we seeing 2.5 degrees of launch angle, 820% of spin, that's a vast gain. And angle attack, 0.2 of a degree difference, club speed, 0.1 of a mile an hour difference. So it's a very similar delivery. I've not manipulated shot shapes at all. But land angles up 5 degrees, 5.7 degrees, height's up 14 feet. That starts to be a significant changer in how the ball lands when it hits the green. You know, where, yes, you know, we want to get distance out of irons, but you're playing an iron primarily as an accuracy club into a green, a par 3, and so what we don't want is for you to carry a bunker at the front or water at the front only for it to run off the back. And this is where we're seeing, even at the top level, them using higher loft fairway woods, more, you know, sort of higher launching, more ball speed gain in the long irons to gain that height and to gain that stopping power. But that Mizuno head is head and shoulders above the other two in terms of gaining the spin. So whilst, yes, the playability, the forgiveness, the ball speed actually on the other two heads is slightly stronger, we're seeing, for the purposes of getting control into the greens, the hot metal into the hot metal HL, that HL head, and the easy way to determine is that colour badge in the back, and you're white for the standard hot metal, blue for the HL, and black for the Pro, which is another model in this series. That head is a carryover from the 923 HL, which was pretty close to as good as this, is a significant change in terms of launch and spin. So if you're someone who's looking for a little extra flight, definitely look at this head. But we'll go into that on-course test just to put it into kind of context in terms of holding greens and what data on a simulated setup, just to give you an insight to that as well. So to illustrate the point in more of a real-world on-course scenario, we're using the simulator on this and going to look at, with the Mizuno heads, that lower spin, lower launch profile versus higher launch in, rather than just the range setting with a data set, let's say a more realistic scenario on course. So I'm going to keep the club speed between 75 and 80 miles an hour, so very much the moderate as we did in the data set a moment ago, and see what happens when a ball hits a green and what it actually means when you're playing, because the data is one thing, but this should hopefully make it a little bit more realistic. Still using the triad ball that we did the other test with, so you know, all things equal, and let's see what they do. So starting with the 925 hot metal, so the stronger flighted head. I'm just playing into the 18th Adair man. I've chosen this because we've got to make the carry. There's water short, but then there's a drop off long. So you know, it's important to not only land it all the way there, then hold it there. So nice contact there. It's kind of homing in on the green. Pitches. Doesn't quite cling onto the back edge. And that's pretty solid. 4,200 revs of spin, 77 miles an hour. We've got a 5-yard difference from carry point to end point. Now, that's not too bad. These are on moderate greens. The moment they firm up, that gets more and more. But equally speaking, you've got to then allow for that extra bit of run out. So solid hit there. Let's see what happens when we move up to the HL head and compare dates. So switch to the HL head. We've got the little bit more loft, head that's designed to get it airborne a bit more, but on course into a green, how much does it change it? We had 41.9 on the land angle with the standard hot metal. What can this do? That's a nice swing, good line. Now, that's stopped faster. So, okay, there's a little bit more club speed, a couple of miles an hour more club speed, but the spin rate's up to 5,200. We've now got, you know, from 5 yards run out distance to 3 yards. So, you know, land angles up to 46 degrees rather than 41. So, yes, a very slightly higher club speed, but which is giving me a hair more height, but the spin's up that 25%. So it gives you so much more of a chance of that ball stopping. So this one's pitched a little bit beyond the flag, but then stopped before the back edge of the green. The previous shot pitched pretty much just short of the flag, got to the back edge, maybe ran off. So that extra bit of height just means practically you've got more chance of holding the green. So there are these sort of magic numbers we talk about, you know, land angle of 45 degrees, you know, seeing a spin, ideally if you can get up to 5,000 odd with a 6-iron, in an indoor scenario in the mats, you get slightly different spin off turf. It just helps get that control into the greens. And you know, where you're playing irons for accuracy, not total run out yardage, that extra bit of height's got to be a good thing. And we're seeing that is so much more important at moderate speeds in the last couple of years, where lofts have got very strong, and now they're starting to see the high launch models reining it back a little bit. Really, really consider these if you're moderate speed. So if you're looking for an iron head to give you that bit of extra height, a bit of extra stopping power. You know, if you're finding a lot of the forgiving heads come out flat and boring and going and don't stop when they land, then you know, the key to that is you make sure that spin rate goes up as well as the launch angle. Now, we didn't test different balls here, but the ball could help you as well with that. But standout head for that this year is this Mizuno head. Now, some players may find that the Ping or the Callaway give them better numbers than I got, but it's definitely worth testing. You know, make sure you get those base lofts up a little bit, make sure you get the ball up in the air, launching quickly, spinning a bit more, and it'll help you into the greens and give you control, especially now we're getting into springtime when the greens firm up. You need that bit of extra height and spin just to slow the ball and hold it there when it gets there. So, hope you've liked the video today. Any comments, please let us know. Anything else you want us to do test-wise, but like, subscribe, and we'll bring you more content in the near future.